What's up, guys? Welcome back to Boost Brothers Garage. Today we are going to show you the development of a new engine swap kit for the Porsche 944. We're going to see the development car, the parts that are complete to this point. We'll talk a little bit about what still needs to be done before the kit is complete and ready to go. And we'll explain why on earth anyone would want to swap a 5-cylinder Volkswagen engine into a Porsche in the first place. Stay tuned. So what we have here is originally a 944 turbo. What year?
86.
86. Originally early offset. Still early, or you switched to late offset?
Still early.
But this car was at one point swapped to an LS. And Alan had some issues with the LS, and he came across a thread on Renlist where a guy had started looking into swapping the 07K into the 944 chassis. Unfortunately, he got pulled off onto other projects, so Alan kind of picked up the torch and ended up developing an entire kit. And here's the engine mocked up in the car. As you can see, there are 5 cylinders, which makes this a very interesting choice. He also has the Spa turbo manifold. This is a cast piece, so it's extremely durable. It's not going to warp. They're really nice. It's designed to be ran with a Garrett. This is a G25 6060, you said?
660.
660, okay. And this is capable of how much power?
660 horsepower.
660 horsepower, which will be plenty. And this thing tucks in real nicely on the passenger side of the engine, so it's away from the intake and everything else like on a standard 944 turbo. You'll also see his custom designed engine mounts. Those were all designed in CAD, nice and powder coated. We have the Iabed oil block adapter, which the nice thing about that is it has provisions for both oil and water for your turbo. It also has a built-in oil pressure relief valve, and you can even run the factory oil pressure sending unit right out of that one oil block. It even has provisions for an oil cooler. Another part of the kit is the power steering adapter down here. There's a CNC machine block, and then there's a secondary bracket on the back side. And the reason for this is it's designed to use a 1.8T power steering pump, because the cars that this engine came in were all designed to use electric power steering. And on top of the engine, in order to try to get as much hood clearance as possible, we've also got the Iabed valve cover, which is just a thing of beauty, except for where I dropped the engine hoist on it and scratched it. There's also this Iabed breather box on here that was designed to clear the 944 hood as well. In my haste to get home, I unfortunately forgot to show you the clutch, flywheel, and throwout bearing setup that we're going to be using on the 07K kit. The clutch and flywheel are from Spec, and they suggested using the throwout bearing from a Pontiac Solstice GXP, interestingly enough. The question a lot of you guys probably have is, why? Why switch out the factory engine in the first place? Now, for a naturally aspirated 944, there's obvious reasons. They don't make a ton of power. They're relatively reliable, but it's just antiquated technology, right? It's a single overhead cam. It's 2 valves per cylinder. Even with the turbo 944, it's a similar engine architecture. They just did some forged internals, and they ceramic lined the exhaust ports, and they threw a turbo on it. And, I mean, there were some other things as well, but you're still looking at lower 200 horsepower from the factory. You can bump up the boost on the turbo, and you can change the exhaust, and you can do some things, and you can get 300 wheel horsepower. If you switch out the turbo, you know, you can get to 400. That's about the upper limit, really, for any sort of longevity with that engine. And the problem is they're not the most reliable at that point. And if you have to rebuild one, it gets real expensive. The blocks are all aluminum. I ended up having my blocks sleeved and doing a hybrid stroker setup. I'll put that playlist up here. And that's what I'm going to be putting in my wide body car. However, the race car is going to get the 07K. So you understand what some of the shortcomings of the factory power plant are. What are the advantages of the 07K? First off, it is the same displacement. It's a 2.5 liter, but it is a 5-cylinder. And being a 5-cylinder, it makes the most glorious noises. Fucking A right. The engine is actually a relative of the V10 from the Lamborghini Gallardo. It shares the same bore and stroke. The cylinder head of the 07K was designed using Lamborghini Gallardo technology. It's a dual overhead cam. It's got 4 valves per cylinder, so it's a 20-valve engine. And the airflow is, I think, like 100 CFM higher on that head than the factory 944 head. Pretty significant. Along with that, the block itself is cast iron, so you don't have any of those coatings to have to worry about. It's also like 4 inches shorter from bell housing to crank pulley, so we're able to move the engine back in the engine bay just a little bit and further improve the 944's already really good weight distribution. As for potential, the 07K, you can make about 400 wheel horsepower on the factory short block, all factory internals. Depending on the year of the engine and whether it's an early generation or a later generation, there are different options for forged crankshafts, and once you have fully forged internals, there are people out there spinning those engines to over 9,000 RPM, making 800 horsepower. They're just absolutely nuts. They're super impressive little engines. And the best part is they're cheap. I picked up my engine for $285 shipped off of eBay. Complete engine. And that was from an 08 Jetta with 96,000 miles. Now, the plans moving forward and what you'll see on the channel, we are going to have 2 different vehicles that are getting 07K swapped. Obviously, Alan's car, which you already saw, his car is immediately getting the turbo, the Garrett turbo. His build is just going to be turbo from day one, and he's shooting for around 400 wheel horsepower. The race car, I decided that I want to swap in an NA engine first, just to see what the performance difference is from the older technology to the newer technology without forced induction. So, I am going to take my car to Putnam Park at the end of August, and I'm going to do a DE there. I'm going to try to set the best possible lap time I can with the car, and then we're going to swap the engine. We're going to put the naturally aspirated 07K in there, not make any other changes to the car, and then we're going to take it back and see how much we can improve our lap times. The horsepower difference is not drastic. I think it's an additional 40 horsepower, so I mean it's not huge by any means, but it should make a noticeable difference. And on top of that, we're going to have the better sound, obviously, which I'm really excited about, and an overall meatier power band. There are unfortunately still some components that are not completely developed for the swap kit. One is the bell housing. Alan had originally designed a bell housing that was going to be manufactured by one of the top bell housing manufacturers in the world, and they gave an initial price, and when they came back with final pricing, it was more than double. So that got taken off the table, and he's gone a different direction now, and he's looking at creating a fabricated bell housing. All the CAD work is done. He just needs to make a proof of concept bell housing and make sure that it's going to work. The other is the intake manifold, which again, all the design work is done within CAD. Found a source to manufacture the intake manifolds, but none are manufactured just yet. And finally, the oil pan. The factory oil pan is going to have to be modified. Now, you could probably get away with dropping the cross member on the 944 using spacers and use the factory oil pan, no modifications, and be able to close the factory hood. Alan does not want to do that, doesn't want to mess with suspension geometry, etc., etc. So, modifications will have to be made to the oil pan, and that's going to involve slicing a corner off and creating a new sump, baffles, etc. to make it a full motorsports oil pan. We're hoping for the kits to be completely ready to go in spring, but development is moving quickly. It's really exciting to see the progress thus far, see the actual components on the car, see the engine sitting in the car. I'm getting pretty excited. And there you have it, a 5-cylinder engine swap for the Porsche 944. It's a super cool project. I think it's going to breathe new life into this platform, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch it all come together. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.